This is the cording tutorial, and here are some of the lovely designs from the tapestry showing these wavy lines, which is one of the themes of the tapestry. And this is one of the design themes that we kind of thought we could use cord for. Here we've got on this slide some of the images of when Andrew and I sort of first started with the colour palette of the tapestry, using Harris tweed and all the different yarns from Appleton's, and getting really excited about colour, because this is one of the things that kind of is a big part of the project. And on the right hand side here you can see some of the Ripples Crafts yarns, and these are actually from one of the stitchers on our project called Helen Lockhart. She's got a company called Ripples Crafts, and she very kindly sent me through some samples of her beautiful yarns. As you can see here in this slide, they're absolutely stunning. So these are the ones that she's actually prepared for us. So she had sent them through to us, and that's when Andrew and I started talking again about this idea of cording. He had had a lot of conversations with a textile consultant called Jamie Wellstead, all about kind of how you could twist these cords together, twist these yarns together, and that could be really nice from a colour perspective, but also it kind of represents the actual twisting of the yarn, but also the stitchers twisting their stories together. So it's got a lot of different meanings, having the cord making as part of the project. Helen has, she dyes all of these yarns herself, and there's lots of different weights of base yarn that she uses. But she dyes all of these and herself, and they're absolutely incredible. I know some of you might have seen these when we were in at the recent workshops, as we've just got an order from Helen. So I had a big box of them that weren't quite ready yet to sort of hand out. So but I know some of you saw them and took down some of the colour names. So these are the speciality yarns that we have for cord making on the project. So a beautiful range of colours, as you can see. A lot of them are really variegated. So like this one here, the nice chunky one, and they've also got amazing names that she names them too, so that they're just lovely to work with. This here is just some of the cords that I started to sample with some of Helen's yarns. As you can see, they just look absolutely gorgeous, and because they've got this variation in the colour, they make really interesting yarn cords when they're made up. And you can see on the right hand side here, with the yellow background, this one here, you can see how I've got them twisting together. So a lot in wavy lines. So a lot of your panels will have areas like that. So here we've got also just some other ways that you can use cords. So you don't always have to use it for the wavy lines. So initially we had thought about using cords for just the wavy lines, but quickly realized that actually you can use them for sort of filling space and for pattern making as well. So these are just a few ideas of how you could do that, sort of different shapes that you could use. And I'll go over how we can attach them a little bit further along. So it's been a bit of a journey, this cord making. So on the left hand side, that is the cord making machine that my mum had for H&D Textiles. And that's the one I first started making some cord on for this project. I mean, I know a lot of people will know how to make cords different ways without a cord winder, and that's absolutely fine. You don't have to use a cord winder for the project. It suits a lot of people to do it other ways. I certainly learned not how to make cord, not on a cord winder, but using a door handle and a pencil. So lots of people know how to do it lots of different ways. It doesn't require a cord winder, and that's absolutely fine. I quite like the cord winder just because when you start doing much longer lengths of cord, you can get yourself in a tangle quite easily, because you do need to have extra yarn in the length because it reduces in size. So if you're thinking about making a cord that's 2 meters long, for instance, you're going to need to start off with just over 4 meters of yarn, so you can get in a tangle. So the cord winding machines are really good for that. So this was the first one that I had on the left hand side, and we're really lucky on this project. We've just got so many amazing volunteers working with us on the project. So the cord making machine on the right hand side is the new and improved cord making machine, which has been made by the husband of one of our stitchers, and he was amazing actually at making things, and saw the cord winder that I had and I wondered about how he could make more, and that was all he was going to do. And then he came back with this, which is on the right hand side. So he created this new and improved cord winder, which has clamps. Those are the things that you can see just sitting on top. So and the clamps are really useful because you can clamp it to a table and it just isn't going to shoot off anywhere, whereas I was just using a bit of glue tack underneath part of my cord winder, because you do need to keep it secure. Obviously, as you go, you do create quite a lot of tension, so it does need to be secure. So he's put these clamps on, which make it really, really handy, and a nice bungee cord to keep it all together. So there's 2 parts to the new and improved cord making machine. You can't see them exactly there, but there's 2 parts, as there is 2 parts to my machine on the left hand side there. And then in the middle, we've just got that's kind of the colour palette, part of the colour palette of what we have to work with. And that's been very kindly put together by Tricia and the students at the Drummond School, who have been really helping out with winding down all of these hanks of yarn that arrived into much more manageable sizes. So as you can see, it's a team effort. We've got some amazing people helping out, and we really appreciate everything you're doing. So yeah, that's some of the yarns that we have to work with there. So just moving on to how do we do it? How do we do the cord winder? What I will do is this presentation I'll do as a PDF as well, and that can be emailed out to everybody. So it's a presentation, but it's also a guide in how to do this. So I've used my cord winder for the pictures. So the method is exactly the same if you're using the new and improved cord winding machine. You just need to remember that you need to use clamps rather than blue tack. Yeah, it just looks a little bit different on the pictures. I haven't got one of the new and improved cord winders here with me. This is the one that I have. So that's what I've used. So all you need for this method is a cord winder, some scissors, and your yarn. It's really quite an easy process, and it doesn't take very long at all. It's actually somebody sent me a wee video recently. Actually, the chap who made the cord making machines, and he sent me a wee video of rope making, and it was remarkably similar process to this process, which was quite interesting, and also brings another sort of dimension to the cord making as well, with all of the connections to fishing in the Highlands and Islands. Yep, so I've got a message here. The cords are made using different yarns to the wool we are using elsewhere. So yeah, well, you can use the you could use the Appleton's wools to do this, but the thing with the Appleton's wools is that they're not they're not very strong, and when you're making cords, you do need quite a lot of tension as you're winding them. So I think what I would say is you could experiment with the Appleton's yarns as well, but they might not they might break a little bit more easily, but you can certainly try it. And if you're successful doing that, that's great. You can use those. But these were the ones that we have. What you need to do is you need to cut 3 lengths of yarn the same size. It's quite important, that bit, because if they're different, then the tension's all wrong. So you just cut 3 lengths of yarn the same size, and you need to remember that the final cord size will reduce. It'll be just less than half the original length of the yarn lengths. So if you want to have a cord that's 1 meter, you probably need to cut your yarn at 2 meters 25, just to be on the safe side. And it can depend a little bit. That's why it's not an exact science, because everybody will wind their cord maybe a little bit tighter or a little bit looser. So you can try with a sample length first, just seeing kind of how much it reduces for you. But I know for me, if I was making a 1 meter length of cord, I would need to cut it at 2 meters 25. So I think I probably do it quite tightly. So what I would recommend is do a resample with a smaller pieces first to see how it reduces, and then you can kind of be slightly more accurate when you're thinking about sizes for your cord. You then need to put both ends of one length together and tie a knot in them. So you have three different pieces of yarn with a knot, each have a knot in the end. Then you need to put the yarn onto the cord winder. You have the knots on the opposite end to the winder. And I haven't got a clamps on here, but I've written there to secure each end of the winder with a clamp, because the new improved version of the cord winder does have the clamps. So at this point, you would clamp the cord winding parts together. And then you wind the cord clockwise. I've put in here to wind it clockwise and then wind it anti-clockwise. Actually, if you wanted to start anti-clockwise, you could do that, but you just need to make sure that you go in the opposite direction later on. So you wind the cord, I put here clockwise, and just keep going in the same direction until it's evenly twisted. And I've got photos here of what it looks like when it's evenly twisted. So the picture on the left here, the yarns aren't quite tight enough there. If it's too loose, it can fall apart a little bit, especially if when you're stitching it onto a panel. So I would recommend that it's a good idea to have it looking a little bit more like it is on the right hand side of the screen. Saying that, you don't want to overdo it, because then it can just be too difficult to do the next step. So you want it to be tight enough, but not too tight, because the next step here, you need to move yarn from each side into the center post. And if it's too tight, it's really quite difficult to do that. So again, I would say just to have a go when if you've got a cord winder borrowed from a hub, I would just say just have a go and see how it works. It'll just ping off and unravel, which has done with me loads of times. So yeah, you just need to do it so it's not too tight, so that you can get them from these posts into the middle here. And then you do the same thing at the other side. So on the hooks here, you just take them from the hook into the middle, and from this hook into the middle. So that's what the winder will look like now, with all of the 3 on the post at the end and the other 3 on the hook at the other end. I remember when I said earlier on, you just need to go in the opposite direction than the way you did. So number 12, this is what the cord looks like when it's evenly wound. It's not too loose or too tight. And for this next step at number 13, it's quite good if there's 2 of you to do this part, but you can do it by yourself. You just need to hold it tightly because you've created quite a lot of tension in the cord. So you just take it off one end and knot it. But if you let go of it, it can just ping off and you have to start all over again from the beginning. So yeah, just make sure you hold it quite securely when you take it off the end, and then knot it quite well. And then you just take the other end off the hook and then knot that end as well. So you should have then what looks like the cord in number 14, where you have these ends that still have knots in at one side and loops at the other. And if you just snip the ends off but leave yourself with sort of 0.5 centimetre to 1 centimetre, as you can see in the picture there on the right hand side at the bottom. So the first time you wind it, you go in one direction. I put clockwise, but it doesn't matter if it's clockwise or anti-clockwise. What matters is that you do it the opposite way when you wind it the second time. If you don't go the opposite way, it won't ply together, and it'll just go really loose, and it won't ply together like a proper cord. If you do it the opposite way, then what happens is it plies it together, so that when you have your knots in, the cord won't unwind itself. So that was the bit that when I first did it again, I was like, why is my cord not working properly? And it's really easy to forget that part. And it was because I wasn't doing it the opposite way the first time to the second time. So the first time you do it one direction, and the second time when you wind it, you do it in the opposite direction. And then it should ply together like that. So once you've got your cord, it's then about attaching your cord and where you're going to put it. So you've got lots of different options on your panels. So there's loads of different ways that you could use cords, because you've got wavy lines. You could use it for the wavy lines. There's no hard and fast rule. We're not saying you have to use cord for all the wavy lines that are on your panel. As you can see in that picture on the left hand side with the stones, there's some stitched lines there, and there's a cord running through it. So you can mix and match. You can have some that are cords and some that are stitched lines. You don't have to use cord for the wavy lines if you don't want to. You can stitch those lines if you want to. So it's just a suggestion. We're just suggesting that this is a really nice thing to do with these beautiful yarns, creating texture and creating something different, that comes out of the surface, off the surface of the panel. But if you don't want to use the cord, that's absolutely fine. What I should also say is that in the most recent order that I got from Helen, I got quite a lot of the lighter weight yarns. They're quite a lot finer, so that the finished cord isn't overly chunky. There are still some chunky yarns in there for people who do want to use those, but the cord that you'll get from the much finer yarns is quite a nice lightweight yarn, so it would be too chunky. So when you're attaching the cord to your panel, I would say probably it's a good idea, if you're doing it for the wavy lines, to do it quite far on towards the end. It'll be different for everybody in terms of their panel, where they're up to with their panel, what's going on their panel when they put when they attach the cords on. But I would probably do it towards the end of the process, but you could certainly make cords for areas first and have them ready to attach. Oh, I've got somebody asking a wee question. Somebody's just asking about where to get the cord yarns from. So the big orders just arrived very recently with me, and then it went to Trisha and the students at the Drummond School, who very, very helpfully wound it all down into manageable amounts. And they're just being sent out to some of the yarn hubs just now. So they're not actually going to be sent out at the moment. I'm not going to send them out to all of the yarn hubs. And I'll tell you the reason why is because we were worried that it would make the amounts too small for each hub. So it was quite difficult knowing how much you need to order, how much people are going to use. So we've got an amount of it, and what's happening is we're going to send it out to 4 of the yarn hubs. So I will let you know by email which yarn hubs those will be, and then you would need to email one of those yarn hubs to access the yarns. But what I'll do in the email is I'll send you the picture that was at the beginning of the slideshow, which Trisha and the students have created like a shade card, which has got the name of the yarns and the colours and the different weights that are available. So that'll be the way to access the yarns. Most of the yarn hubs now have a cord winder, apart from maybe one, but they'll be getting one very soon. So everybody should be able to access a cord winder from their hub. But just remember that we do need to share these amongst everybody. So you'll need to borrow it for a while and then hand it back. And Ben's saying that she's got the one for Verso at the moment. Thank you, Ben. Okay, so for attaching the cord, what I've put here is just a little example with some pictures at the bottom of how to attach the cord invisibly using small stitches. So it sort of sits proud, it sits on top of the fabric. So it's very, very simple. You're just going to come up, well, before you come up through the fabric, use Appleton's wool to do this. You don't need to use linen wool to do this. You can use Appleton's wool to do this part. And what I would say is that if you just match the Appleton's wool to the colour of the cord as closely as you can, and then that'll just help with not being able to see any kind of smaller stitches underneath. And then all you do is you're just going to come up through the linen. I had a chain stitch there underneath where I was applying that cord, which just made it easy to see where I was coming up. So you're just going to come up there through the linen and then just go through the bottom of the cord only. Pop it out of the other side and then down through pretty much the same spot as you just came up through the linen. And then depending on how long the cord is and where you're applying it, I did those about 1/2 centimetre along the stitches, just every sort of 1/2 centimetre. And that just meant that it didn't droop from the line that I wanted it to be on. So you could do it between 0.5 centimetre and 1 centimetre apart, just depending on the size of the cord that you're attaching. But that should be absolutely fine. There will be a knot at each end of the cord, and that's fine to leave it on the surface at each end. If you want to tuck the ends under to neaten it up, you could do that. It would be absolutely fine to just tuck them under the end and stitch over the end if you wanted to do that. But it can be a feature of using the cords to have the ends showing. Now, for some places where you might want to have cord, but you might not want to have loads and loads of cord, or you are worried about having knots at the end, then you can also use these specialty yarns for couching as well as for making cords. So you can see here on the right hand side, I've done a sample which has got couching and a cord as well, and a line of chain stitch. So there are quite a few places in a few panels where you might have lots of cord overlapping each other. And if you want to reduce bulk in that process, you can use different methods. You don't have to use the cord either as well all the time. You could just couch these lines if you wanted to. That would be absolutely fine as well. The other advantage to kind of using couched lines as well, there's some panels where you have a wavy line and then it stops and then there's an image and then it starts again on the other side of the image. And if you don't want to have a knot at the end of the line just next to whatever your the centerpiece is, then this is quite a good way to still use the specialty yarns, but use them couched, and then you could use cords elsewhere in your panel. One of the advantages with this couching method is that you don't have to have a knot at the end, so you can come up. It's called plunging. I always think that sounds funny. It sounds like you're going swimming, but you're just gonna what it means is that you bring your needle up from the bottom of the fabric to the top of the fabric with the specialty yarn in it at the beginning of the couch line, and then you'll do it again at the end of the couch line once you've couched the line down. So what you'll do is you just come up with as you can see in image 1, you just come up from the bottom of the fabric through to the top of the fabric and secure that yarn underneath. And then you don't need to plunge it back down again until you've finished couching along the line, because otherwise you wouldn't know how much you needed. And then with an Appleton's yarn, you'll just use small stitches that you can see on the right hand side to couch over the specialty yarn, and you just do that all the way along until the end. And then when you're at the end, you then thread your specialty yarn back through a needle and then plunge it back down through the fabric so that it'll get a neater finish, like this here. So that's just a different way, of doing it, and it means you can kind of incorporate a couple of different methods. You don't just have to use the cord, you can also use couching too. Okay. I think that is everything that I had to share just now, and we'll just come back to see everybody. Have you got any questions at this point? If you have got questions, if you can pop your hand up, or just write them in the chat box, because we've got 45 of us here, so don't all shout at once. Okay, I can see Marilyn's got her hand up. Is it Marilyn?
I've unmuted now. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have to use the cord maker, or could we use different methods of making cords? For instance, you've got I-cords and perhaps a plait, or there was something the medieval people used to use called a Lucet, which was like a horseshoe shaped thing that you could make cords on it.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with Lucet, which I understand is a contraceptive pill, but it's spelled differently.
Right. Wow. All of the different meanings that, yes, the answer is yeah, you can. Absolutely. This is just it's just a start, and it's just a suggested way of being able to do it. But of course, like we know, everybody brings their own creativity, which is what makes it amazing on this project. So yes, please, you can use those other methods and share them on the Facebook forum as well, so that other people can see them and they can learn how to do them as well, because it's all about us finding out how to do all of these different things. So that's brilliant. I think anybody who wants to do that, that's a great thing to do.
The thing with using this Lucet is that you can have any length of cord, so that you don't have to cut it to start with. You're just actually creating the cord as you go along. So,
well, that sounds very good, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay, I'll work on that one.
I'd be interested to know more about that. It sounds great.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I think I've got a question from Diane. If you have one line drawn on tapestry, can you twist in a mixture of speciality threads and cord? Can you twist in? I'm not quite sure, Diane, I'm understanding what you mean.
Yeah, what I mean is, like, you know how you use speciality threads and a cord on, like, say you had multiple threads going across. If you've only got one line drawn, are you only allowed to use one thread, or can you use more?
No, you could use more. The lines that are there as a guide.
Right, okay, as long as you cover them, that's okay.
Yeah, as long as you cover the line that's there. But if you want to add in more cord or more stitching, or if you want to make that a feature, then that's absolutely fine. That sounds really interesting as well.
Good. And do you have to go over the journey stones, or can you stop and start?
You can stop and start. I mean, it's just up to you. I think it depends on if you've got knots or you haven't got knots at the end, and how you kind of deal with that. Whether you use couch line and you plunge it in so you don't have a knot. But no, there isn't a rule about whether you need to. There's no rules. It's just guidelines.
Just guidelines.
Just guidelines, yeah. And the thing is, you all make such amazing things that it's just guidelines. It's like what Andrew says with the lines on the panel, they're guidelines. And so if you want to kind of really go for it with the cord making, and you've only got one line and you're feeling a bit like, oh, we've only got one line on our panel and we really want to go for it with this, then that's great. Go for it. That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Is that what you were asking, Diane?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your question. Have we got any other questions? Steph? Is it Steph? Hi, Steph. You need to unmute yourself because we can't hear you. Oh, there we are.
Yeah. On our panel, which is the one you featured at the beginning with the spinning wheel in the middle.
Yes.
And it's got all about 7 lines all intermingled going round in the spiral.
Yes.
If we wanted to do the cord, because we wanted to do different, like chain stitch and different thicknesses. If we're using the thicker cord, I mean, how do you, because you really need a continuous piece all the way around. Are you going to be able to do cording to go all the way around that spiral?
You're going to need a really long piece.
Yeah. So is there a way of joining it, or?
those ones, no, there isn't a way of joining it. You could always start, and you might be able to start and stop again with your one, because it wouldn't necessarily be bad, to see 2 knots, because you could kind of, you could wind them together or something, like, the 2 chords, if you couldn't get one continuous one. I think that would be the way to do that. You could either do it as a really, really long chord, which you can do with the, you can do with the chord winder and this other machine that Marilyn was talking about that I now need to find out about. But we've got the chord winders, and they will do it. They will do a really, really, really long one. You just need to make sure that you double up the amount that you need. So if you're going to need 2 meters, you'll need to start with 4. So you will need a big space. And a few of you to do it, but it will work at that length as well.
Good. Thank you.
That's okay. Thanks for your question. How do we pronounce it again?
It's a Lucet. If you look above that comment, I've put some screenshots of it.
Okay.
Oh, right. Okay.
It looks really interesting. It's really cool.
You can, there's quite a lot of different ways you can. There's you can get a little tool called a loom tool as well, LOOME loom tool, and those are like it looks like a little robot, a little wooden robot, and you can make all sorts of things on those, and you can make cord on those as well.
Dollies that we had with loops on the top, metal loops on the top.
And it comes in the middle.
And you did like a loop over, and you'd end up with this long crochet tube, wouldn't it? Am I the only one that had a little dolly like that?
French knitting.
I had those as well. Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah,
and you could use those. What we're not saying is you have to do it this way. This is one way to do it, and there's loads of other ways to do it, and it's great to do it these other ways as well, because then it'll just add more in terms of texture and interest, because you'll get different types of chords and different types of ways of doing it. So that will just add interest to the finish of the tapestry. So it'd be lovely to share these ideas on the Facebook forum, so that people can see different ways of doing it as well. This is just one way of doing it, the way that I showed you tonight. Have we got any more? Oh, the Lucet is the medieval knitting Nancy, used to make cords to fasten clothes together. It's fascinating. See the things that you learn. It's brilliant. Okay, have we got any more questions from anybody else about how to use the cords, or where to use them, or if you're worried about using them, or anything like that? Was everybody happy and okay?
Sorry.
Steph, have you got your hand up?
Yes, sorry again.
No, it's okay.
When you can we use those walls for actually doing the other lines as well as cording, to like do a chain stitch? We can use the colour of the walls that you're doing for the cording.
Can you use them to stitch with?
Yeah.
So not really, because they're a bit too heavy. What we're using these yarns for is for making cord or couching with them. But if you're gonna stitch with them, I think they'll just be too thick for doing that. So if we can do stitching with the Appleton's yarn, that's a good question. And then you're just going to use these on the surface.
Yeah. So it's just matching the nearest colour up from your Appleton's.
Yes. Yeah. You would just, so if you're combining it with other stitching that you're doing on the surface for those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would just match it. You could match it, or just, use colours that go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's okay. Tricia, have you got your hand up?
I do, yes. Was just to mention that the yarn has been divided and sent out to the hubs. It should have arrived for tomorrow, and it would be quite important for people to give us a length that they, when they put in the request for the colour, that they give us length as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So if you know, rather than cutting it down just to a certain length, so that is it's a really good point. What I think what you're saying, Tricia, is that if you can think about where you're going to use the yarn, and then think about how much you're going to need.
Say you want a 1 meter cord,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got your 2 meter length. Is that the one that you then loop round and tie the knots together? And that gives you.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So this method of doing it will reduce by half roughly. But when I do it, for instance, if I was going to make a piece that was 1 meter, I used 2.25, 2 meters and a quarter, because I wind it quite tightly, and you will need to experiment a little bit with length, because it's a bit like, you know, with knitting and sewing, everybody's tension's a little bit different. So some people will wind it a bit tighter than other people will wind it. So, and the tighter you wind it, the more it reduces in length.
And you'll need 3 of them, because you're starting off with the 3.
Yes.
So for 1 meter,
Yeah,
you'd need 3 times 2.25.
yes, exactly. Yeah. But I think what oh, sorry, Tricia, were you going to say something?
No, I'm just saying, well worked out, then people will have to work out how much they need and then request that.
Yeah, so people will need to work out how much they need, and then that's what they'll need to request from the yarn hubs. Yeah, because it is a bit tricky, kind of sharing out the resource amongst everybody. So we're just figuring out the best way to do that. So at the moment, we've got the yarn going to there's 4 hubs that it's going to go to, and what I'll do is I'll get an email together which will have that PowerPoint presentation as a PDF, and just which yarn hubs you can contact for yarn, so with their email addresses, and I'll include in that just about what you need to ask them for in terms of length, and the shade card that Tricia and the students at Drummond have also got a picture of, so that you can see the colours and the names for ordering them. Does that make sense? Do you think we'll all be able to get this yarn all around where it needs to go? It's a bit of a mammoth task, isn't it? We can get, if a supply runs out of a particular colour, can you order more? So yeah, what I've done is I've done an initial order with Helen, and like I said when I was going through the presentation, it's really, really difficult to know how much we need, because it depends on so many different things. So we've done an initial order with her, and we might need to go them back and order again, but she doesn't take too long to get things back to us if we do need more of a certain colour. But I would encourage you to think about what you need, and then order that before you order it, you know, just so we're being mindful of it's this precious resource. Ben's asking, can you create effects by having 3 different colors in one cord? Yes, you can. Oh, it looks like I'm doing something on, I don't know, like, is anybody else seeing my screen go funny? Looked like I was doing a dance there. Yes, you can. You can use different colors in the cord. You can use different weights of yarn, but what you find if you use the different weights of yarn is it doesn't go together quite as tightly or as uniformly, but it can be quite nice as well. So it's, you know, what I found when I've made them is that the better ones that I've made have had the same weight of cord, but you can use different colors of the same weight. It just seems to, with that method, it just seems to be that you get a better cord if you use the similar weight, the same weight of yarn for the 3 different types. If that makes sense. Have we got any more questions? So what I'll do is I'll follow this with an email. Oh, I'm couching with the specialty threads. Do you use these threads for the stitch over stitch as well? No, because the specialty yarns are really quite thick and they're too thick to stitch with. So when I went through the step by step, yeah, that's one of the things for the couching, is that if you use the Appleton's yarn for the stitch over for couching down the yarn, and you can you can do whatever color you want to. You can match it if you're couching, or you can do it something different, or, you know, there's all sorts of ways of doing lots of lovely different couching methods, but you use the Appleton's yarn for doing that. I think what I'll do is I'll save the PowerPoint and I'll add in, if there's anything that I've got from the feedback and the questions that you've asked tonight, I'll try and make sure that there's that's covered in the PowerPoint, and then I'll save it as a PDF and email that out to everybody at the same time as I email the information about where to get the order the yarns from and how to order them. I know it sounds really complicated, but we can get there. It'll be great, and you'll all make these beautiful cords and they'll look amazing. As they do, they will, yeah, they'll look amazing because they are, and they're gorgeous. They're so beautiful, the yarns that she's got. They really are. You know, they'll be absolutely lovely to work with, and I think they'll really add something different as well, you know, to the tapestry. So it's just going to be so textural with what everybody's doing already. You know, we've just got a beautiful stitching and amazing applique and loads of different amazing methods going on across the whole tapestry. So having the cords there as well will be amazing. We just have to get over this, how we get them, how everybody gets their yarn and how everybody gets what they need. But I think that we can get there with the help of all the amazing Yarn Hub coordinators. So hopefully you'll be excited to use all of them.